need, the urgent, the strong, the clear need for the American labor movement, affiliated and non-affiliated, to get together in a spirit of brotherhood and sisterhood, and he used the word solidarity. And I would remind Brother Clark of his comments then in relationship to PATCO and ask ourselves, what's so different about this issue? What is so different from an employee organization deciding to set up a picket line, one which we may not agree with? We're not saying here that we should pass a resolution in support of their line. What I am saying is we shouldn't be even discussing this issue. It is their issue, and it is no different than either the action that PATCO took rightly or wrongly. As far as the substitute wording, well, it's a little awkward for me to address myself to issues of the Democratic Party because I is one, a Democrat that is. And it's sort of awkward talking about my own party. Certainly the forum to do that is the Democratic Convention, and I will utilize the opportunity at that point. But it seems to me that any kind of resolution that sort of gives this blanket support to activities of the Democratic Party or the Republican Party is rather inappropriate. It is true that we tend to support the Democratic Party. We are, by and large, many of us, the Democratic Party. But on every issue we don't always agree. And we want to reserve the right, in all cases, we want to reserve the right to disagree. And a resolution that gives kind of blanket support to any kind of activity doesn't seem very appropriate in my way of thinking. So what I would suggest, and I would urge you to go be with me on this issue in a true spirit of solidarity, and that is, let's drop the issue, let's kill the resolution, and let's move on to the things that do pertain directly to our concerns. Thank you.
Is there further discussion on the resolution? Brother Sherburne. You're on now, Chairman.
And I rise in support of the resolution. I'll say to Brother Hanson, solidarity is a two-way street. The same organizations that he's supporting started a movement in last November to decertify my organization from state employees, to steal members of the AFL-CIO. We negotiated our contract with the governor. It went up for ratification vote. This organization also picketed our vote, hand-billed our members, trying to get our members to vote no on a contract that we negotiated. Now, if that's solidarity, brother, I'd like to know your description of it. This organization has had ample opportunity to affiliate with the Maine AFL-CIO, and Mr. Hanson knows that. Brother Hanson set up a meeting in this very building 2 years ago. After considerable effort by the AFL-CIO to get ratification of the MSCA's first contract through the legislature, acting on good faith of their word that they would sit down and talk affiliation after the legislature was over with. Sitting at that meeting was Brother Gorham, Brother O'Leary, Brother Hanson, myself, Brother Isaiah, Brother McCurdy from my organization, John Oliver of the MSCA, Mr. Willis, who was then the vice president, is now the president, and their attorney, Mr. Finn. They arrived here at supper time. It was supposed to be a 2-day meeting. They arrived here at mealtime. Mr. Willis's first comment was, I want to make it very plain that any affiliation with the AFL-CIO, I will resign my position as vice president. That was how the meeting opened. It lasted during supper. That was the 2-day meeting. Mr. Willis had to fly to the northern end of the state the next day. Mr. Oliver had to be somewhere else. Their attorney had to take his kid to meet a game warden so the game warden could take him fishing. That was their commitment to affiliation after they got their contract. We've been affiliated with this organization. We pay our dues and our per capita. I am getting tired of going to to labor summer institutes, paying $1,000 a month per cap to the Maine AFL-CIO, and then when I send people to the summer institute, I pay $90 per member that goes there. That organization has been coming to every summer institute and paying the same rate that I pay, then they don't pay the $1,000 a month. This is not, and I did not want to bring it to the floor here as a organizational thing, and it was not intended to be that. But if Mr. Hanson wants to make it that by calling for solidarity, I say it begins at home. When are we going to start to take and protect our own houses from burning instead of running off and protecting somebody else's while our own burns? Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the resolution?
If there's nobody else that hasn't spoken, I'd like to speak again, Brother Chairman.
You may speak.
Brother Hanson, with all due respect, I'd like to agree with the brother who just spoke. For those of you who don't know, I'm here from the Portsmouth Naval Shipyard. We have 14 AFL-CIO affiliated trade unions involved with the Metal Trades Council of the Metal Trades Department of the AFL-CIO at that shipyard. In the time that the Metal Trades Department and Council has represented that shipyard, we've had constant battles with quote-unquote unions, NAGI, NEFI, and others. The last time our contract was due, it cost us close to upwards of $100,000 to battle this union for our rights to represent those employees at that shipyard. And I re-emphasized my remarks as before, and I think it should be left up to any individual, whether that individual wanted to cross or not cross an informational picket line or any other picket line put up by any labor organization. However, I think it should be made specifically clear by this organization and those of you here representing AFL-CIO affiliated unions and organizations that they do not have your support. As has been pointed out, we pay dues to this organization, and it gives us the right to come here and speak. And when we can argue all we want here on the floor, and we walk out that door when the session's over, we're unified. And let's keep it that way. We honor, as John's just pointed out, all AFL-CIO picket lines. But I want to relate one more thing. I've seen many instances in the labor movement where sometimes, due to statements, comments, and so forth come out by other organizations, that quote-unquote the term organized labor is used in a very slack way to represent all of these organizations. We are tied in and down sometimes as organized labor. Just this past year, in trying to affiliate some people in New Hampshire, a statement was made by an individual at a convention that the AFL-CIO was against abortions and so forth in relation to a constitutional convention. And certain groups all of a sudden became up in arms with this statement. It wasn't that the AFL-CIO was taking a stand one way or the other against abortions, which wasn't specifically explained. They were against the Constitutional Convention idea. A lot of times things get tied in with organized labor, and before we have a chance to get out there and re-explain and mend the fences, a lot of harm is caused sometimes. I think this is a possibility in this situation that could hurt labor and its standing within this state.
Thank you, brother. Is there further discussion of the resolution?
Byron Weymouth, Local 471. And I think this resolution would do nothing more than widen the gap between the MSCA, MTA, and the AFL-CIO. And I should hope that we would try to come together instead of going further apart. And as far as belonging to this, the International Association of Machinists, not all of their locals are members of this group. Thank you.
I might remind the brother that the International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers are an AFL-CIO affiliate. There are very few international and national unions in the state of Maine that have 100% affiliation, brother, so let's not be calling names, please. Any further discussion of the resolution?
Design?
Yes.
Mike Kavanaugh, Local 667, Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union. I would just like to make clear to the delegates here assembled, perhaps clear up some confusion. Last week, perhaps the week before, shortly after the notification appeared in the newspapers of the intentions of the State Employees Association and the MTA to picket the Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner, I received a call from the Maine State Employees Association asking for our union support, asking for our members to participate on the picket line with those organizations. My response to the MSEA when they called was that I thought it was an absolutely ill-conceived idea from their point of view or the point of view of the rest of the labor movement. Further, I reiterated to them that our union was a member of the Maine State AFL-CIO, paying per capita tax on 2,000 members, and that we take no action of any sort without consensus from the rest of the Maine AFL-CIO. I made it very clear to the MSEA, I made it clear to Brother Gorham, who I spoke with, I made it clear to Brother Sherburne, who I then called, that our organization's position was not to support in that picket line, not to cross that picket line, and further that we are believers in what is referred to as democratic centralism, and that should a decision be made by this convention, that our organization would certainly support that decision. Thank you.
Is there further discussion of the resolution?
Yes, Dennis Libby, IBEW Local 2327. I just want to say one thing. You know, I don't think any of us here are really looking at the true issue. It isn't the fact of a picket line. It's the reasoning for it. But this move, I think, stinks, because the only thing that I can see here is it's going to split our friends of labor, the Democratic Party, right down the middle in the next elections, because there's going to be some that honor it, some that don't. There's going to be a lot of hard feelings all the way around here. And I think, you know, we've seen enough of what's going to happen with a split in 1980. I don't think we need another one in 82.
Is there further discussion of the resolution? Take the microphone, please.
I'm Elizabeth Gorham, Local 2327 of the IBEW, and I move the question.
The question has been called for. All of those in favor of moving the question will please say aye. Aye. All of those opposed? The resolution as amended from the Resolutions Committee. It has been moved and seconded that this resolution be accepted by this delegation, by this convention. All of those in favor of accepting the resolution will please say aye. All of those opposed? It's the vote. The resolution is defeated.
Want to do Chris and Peter? Yeah. Okay. Should I tell them about the other business that we were going to do?
Let me do one around first.
Okay.
For those of you who are bringing extra people with you to the banquet tonight, if you have not yet purchased a ticket or expressed your intent to purchase a ticket, will you please do so at this point in time? Go to the registration office, see one of our staff people, and let them know that you want tickets. Roast Boilermaker.
Mr. Chairman.
The chair recognizes the delegate and questions for what reason he rises.
Since the committee resolution has been defeated quite heavily, I would like to resubmit the resolution number 10 for action upon that, because I still feel as though that resolution has some merit with the clarifications that I made, and I also have just recently found out that I got to get after the sound man over here. He says that he's my friend, but what the hell is he trying to screw me up for, that noise? I just recently found out, and I take challenge to the statement that was made pertaining to the PATCO situation and this situation, because the PATCO situation was handled strictly by the President of the United States, and I understand that we have a member in this room that is involved in the fact-finding of the MSEA and the Maine teachers, and I think that that in itself should differentiate between those two situations. So I just wanted to, or felt as though that that should be clarified, but I would like to resubmit that resolution number 10.
Is that a motion, brother?
Yes.
It has been moved and seconded that resolution number 10 be resubmitted to the Resolutions Committee. Under the terms of the Constitution, this will require the affirmative vote of 2/3 of the delegates here assembled. Is there any discussion on the motion? Brother Hutchinson.
My name is Mr. Hutchinson, 2968, local president. I think everybody has to understand one major thing. This is on our floor. Everybody's thinking, well, if we take it off the floor, we got it made. If this goes off the floor now that it's out here, that's sending a message that we're back in the MSEA. And I'm telling you, with the things they've done to us, we can't afford to back them. They've dragged us into some things that we should never have got into. Now they're trying to drag us into something that's going to hurt us all. And I think everybody better think about it. You can't just walk away from this issue. The group that I'm here with, if we'd have had our way, it probably wouldn't have come to the floor. We probably wouldn't have brought up the question. But it's here. And you're going to have to deal with it now. Because if you just forget it, that's saying we're supporting them. And it's time that the Maine AFL-CIO decides who they're going to support, their own people or somebody else.
It has been moved and seconded that the resolution be resubmitted to the Resolutions Committee for further work. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Point of order.
What is your point of order, brother?
I question the legality of this particular motion in its second. This body already, by a 2/3 vote earlier today, referred this resolution to the Resolutions Committee. They discussed it, and they came back with a recommendation. That recommendation was not accepted by this body. I don't think that that kills the original resolution. I think they have a responsibility to go back and come back with additional language, or the original resolution.
If that is your feeling, then, brother, we'll vote with the 2/3 to resubmit to committee. We have dealt with resolution number 10. It has been defeated. It has now been moved and seconded that it be resubmitted to the Resolutions Committee.
Point of order. The committee came back with an amended resolution, and the amended resolution was voted down. Nobody voted down the resolution.
I thank you for your point of order, brother, and will remind you that Resolution 10 has been dealt with. It was defeated. We are now without resolution. The motion is to resubmit resolution number 10 to the committee for further work. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All of those in favor of resubmitting this resolution to committee will please say aye. Aye. All of those opposed? It's a vote. The resolution is resubmitted to committee. The Resolutions Committee will convene forthwith in the Windjammer Room.
Convention will come to order. The next order of business, I'd like to call upon Sister Chris Hasted and Brother Peter Kelman to give us a brief report on plant closing. Following their report, we will break into district caucuses, and then we will have nominations following the district caucuses. Following the report, I will say more about the district caucuses. Sister Hasted and Brother Kelman.
Sisters and brothers, last October, Brother O'Leary appointed a committee to try to deal with the problems of plant closures and runaway shops in this state. We've had a lot of ups and downs. Following the discussion that just took place, may be indicative of some of the problems that we run into too. First thing we tried to do was write some legislation that would alleviate some of the problems that workers face when they're laid off due to closures. We spent a lot of time and wrote a pretty good piece of legislation. So good that other states are also trying to pass legislation based on the legislation we wrote. The bad news is that we submitted it at a time when Ronald Reagan became president, and it isn't exactly a trend outside of the labor movement to support this legislation. An indication of how bad it is that boss Porter Layton, it was announced that he was to become the Assistant Undersecretary of Labor at the committee hearing that dealt with plant closure legislation in this state. Now that's the bad news. We do have some good news. The good news is that because of the work of our committee, there are a lot more workers in this state that are getting paid severance pay. On your table, there's a packet that we've put together. And on the third page, there's a listing of what's happening right now in the state in terms of plant closures and whether or not people are getting severance pay, whether or not anything's being negotiated or not. And if you compare that to what's happened in years past, you'll see that there's probably a 100% increase in the number of people that are starting to get severance pay. And the way we went about doing this was we wrote our legislation and submitted it, but we didn't stop there. We put out a leaflet that went to 30,000 union members in this state describing the legislation. And it's true that we weren't able to use this leaflet to get the legislation passed, but what it did do was raise the consciousness of workers in the state about the question of severance pay. And that's a positive side of the work that we've done. Going along with that, it's extremely important that anyone involved in contract negotiations be aware of the severance pay statute. Because in one case, there was a contract in the state, and I won't say whose it was, but in that contract it stated that if there was a closure, workers would get 1 day's severance pay for every year they worked. If they didn't have anything in that contract, they would get a week's pay. Sister Chris Hasted spent a lot of time working on this legislation, and she's going to go over the laws that exist now briefly to make sure that people understand that they consider the severance pay statute when they negotiate on this issue. Thank you.
As what I'd like you to do is take a look at your package that we've got on your tables. It looks like this. As Peter said, we have a plant closing law in this state. It's the best law like it in the country. We want you to know what it is. We want you to use it. We want you to enjoy its benefits. And we want you to fight to protect it in the next sessions of the legislature, because we're sure it's going to come under attack from employers in the state. The first page is just sort of a description of some newspaper headlines of plants that have closed within the last year. We put the clipping of the Norwalk shoe closing on the front page in its entirety because it's pretty impressive. Workers at that plant, when it closed, got an aggregate of $1.7 million in severance pay benefits under this statute. That was an average of about $3,600 per worker. The next page of the package talks about the law itself, and I'll go over it with you just briefly. The statute itself says that when a plant closes, moves, or substantially reduces its workforce, you may be entitled to severance pay under Maine law, provided that the following conditions are met. That the plant's had 100 or more people working for it in the past 12 months of its operation, that the closing isn't a result of a bankruptcy or a natural disaster, that if the plant moved, it moved at least 100 miles from its original location, and probably most importantly to us, that there's no provision for severance pay as a result of a closing in your contract. If the above conditions are met, and a particular worker has worked at the plant for 3 years or more, and if in the case of a relocation, he or she hasn't accepted work at the new plant, then that person's entitled to severance pay of 1 week for each year that he or she worked at the plant. It's extremely important that we're all familiar with this statute in its entirety if we're bargaining contracts, bargaining the effects of a closing. As Peter said earlier, we can make a deal that's not as good as we might get under state law if we're not entirely familiar with the statute. The last page of the package has the statute reproduced in its entirety, and I think that everybody should read it and become familiar with it. And the page just before that is a thank you page. It thanks all the members of the AFL-CIO that were so helpful to us in both distributing information, talking to their legislators, and generally helping us in the effort in the last year. Without the efforts of the people here in this room and the people in their locals at home, we wouldn't be having the kind of enforcement actions that we're having in the state right now. Not only are we working to get it enforced, but the Bureau of Labor has expressed a sincere interest in helping us with enforcement under this statute, and in fact is pursuing several cases right now. If anybody has any questions about the statute, or if they're faced with a situation of a closing, or they're bargaining the effects of a closing, we wish that they'd get in touch with us. We'd be happy to help them. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Kelman. Chair recognizes Brother Kavanaugh.
Hold on, John. Brother Leary, I just ask your indulgence for 1 minute to speak on this issue. I sat in the grassroots political workshop yesterday afternoon, and many of us who were in the room were concerned, as I'm sure we all are, as to how to motivate our members, how to get our members involved politically, how to deal with the apathy of all too many of our members. And I would like to say that this particular issue is one which we in the Clothing and Textile Workers Union have found to be quite successful in terms of motivating our own members. We happen to work in industries which have suffered greatly from plant closures over the last 15 years. Our members are becoming increasingly aware of the importance of this sort of legislation to their jobs. And one thing that might point out to our members and everyone else in the hall as to what the employers consider about this particular legislation. Last week in the Waterville Sentinel, on the front page, the vice president of Hathaway Shirt Company, which is one of the largest employers that we have under contract, was quoted as speaking to the local Rotarians on the subject of what they consider to be the hostage bill, the plant closing legislation that currently exists in the state of Maine, and that the Hathaway Shirt Company, and I assume their parent corporation, Warnaco, are going to be making that plant closing legislation their number 1 legislative priority in the next session of the legislature. That to me is enough to indicate that we damn well better support the work of the AFL-CIO Committee on Runaway Shops and try to involve all of our members in a fight to protect and strengthen the legislation that we do have. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Kavanaugh. Chair recognizes Brother Sullivan. Would you identify yourself, please?
Yes, Kevin Sullivan, Local 385, United Food and Commercial Workers Union. Last year when Peter and Chris and several other individuals, Eddie Gorham, got together to begin to put together the bill, the plant closing bill that was brought before the legislature in the last session. I was involved in some of the meetings, and went to the hearing and passed decisions and all the things, not really studying as much as I should, because by now I think I'm almost an expert. I think if you look down at the sheet that's on that page, the UFCW is down there a couple times. And also on another thing that's of interest on that sheet is all the companies that are listed down there. The only one that paid under the law was a non-union company. We're presently in court right now with Littman Poultry over in Augusta for severance pay that we have to get involved with, where we have a meeting with Fort Halifax Packing, which is over in Waterville. That was another case that was going to be brought by the Attorney General, and in fact, let me just say this. All of you are aware of the great and quick decline of the poultry industry, of which was completely organized by the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. We had meetings with the people from Littman who notified us that they were going to be shutting down the business, and also Fort Halifax, which said they were going out of business. Then somebody called them up on the telephone and said, you know that the state of Maine has a severance pay law. No sooner did they find out that, and then we were called back by the company and said, well, we're only going out on an indefinite layoff. That right away told us that the guys really didn't want to get involved in the severance pay situation. The companies here in the state of Maine, the hostage law and all these things, saying that it's going to discourage industrial growth in the state of Maine. I say it didn't discourage Pratt & Whitney from coming to the state of Maine. It didn't discourage the Bath Iron Works from making their expansion. It didn't discourage a lot of companies. What was brought out in the hearing is anyone that's coming to the state of Maine, we want them to stay. If they're coming and planning on staying for a couple of years, using our labor, then when they decide to go someplace else and to leave, we don't want them in the first place. But I think as Chris and Peter, who have done an excellent job, in fact, one hell of a job, and will give anyone a hand, is know this law, because, hey, the way things are going, it could be any one of you tomorrow that your plant could shut down or pack up and move away for whatever business, for whatever reason other than bankruptcy. And let me tell you, I think anyone can look and know you got some people there with a lot of time. And one thing about this law, and a lot of them feel, whether it's 28 or 29 years, that severance pay that they receive is nothing for all the blood and the sweat that they gave their employer through all their years, helping that guy make his money, build his 1 or 2 houses from here to Timbuktu, so he can enjoy the rest of his retired life, for them to make it worth for all the time that they gave. Thank you.
Thank you, Brother Sullivan. Let me add simply that the time that both Peter Kelman and Chris Hasted have put into this legislation has been tremendous. Countless hours that they've spent developing this legislation, and also the work that Chris has done on unemployment insurance has been of great help to both Eddie and I. We will now, the procedure that we normally follow is that we break into district caucuses to discuss the nomination of officers and executive board members. Some people have asked what district they live in. It is by residence, not by employment. And I would remind you that the districts are on page 10 of your Constitution. District 1 includes Aroostook, Penobscot, Piscataquis, Washington, Hancock, Waldo, and Knox counties. District 2 includes Sagadahoc, Lincoln, Kennebec, and Somerset counties. And District 3 includes Androscoggin, Franklin, Oxford, Cumberland, and York counties. District 1 caucus will be chaired by Brother Woodrow Cody. They will meet in the front of the convention hall. District 2 will be chaired by Brother James Harrington. They will meet in the Windjammer room. And District 3 caucus will be chaired by Brother George Netto, and they will meet at the back of the convention hall. When you have completed your caucus in approximately 15 minutes, I would ask you to return to the hall, and at that time we will open nominations first for the office of Secretary Treasurer, and then we will move to the nominations of members of the Executive Board. So if you would kindly go to your caucus areas now. Caucus District 1 is in the front of the convention hall, District 2 is in the Windjammer room, and District 3 will be in the back of the convention hall. Brother Cody? Brother Cody? Have you completed your caucus? I just want to know if you've completed your caucus. Thank you, Brother Cody. Brother Harrington, has District 2 completed their caucus? You have completed. District 3, Brother Netto, have you completed your caucus?
We're still in we're having a hell of a decision, but I think we've completed it yet.
You can't walk fast enough to get there. Convention will come to order. Brother Gorham has a few announcements to make.
Just an update on the credentials report. Ray Bamford from Local 14 and J has left, and DeLance White will be casting his votes. Late registration, Neil Hapworth, representing the Northern Maine Building Trades, with 2 votes. At the moment, the delegate count is 163 delegates with 23,592 votes.
Thank you, Brother Gorham. At this time, the chair will open the nomination process for the office of Secretary Treasurer of the Maine AFL-CIO. Are there any nominations for the office of Secretary Treasurer of the Maine AFL-CIO? The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Portland. Would you identify yourself, please?
Yes, sir. I'm Elizabeth Gorham from Local 2327, and it gives me great pleasure to nominate my son, Edward, for the position of Secretary Treasurer of the Maine AFL-CIO.
Thank you, Sister Gorham. Woodrow Cody, IBW Local 1253. I make a motion the nominations cease. That motion to nominate Brother Gorham hasn't been seconded, Brother Cody.
I'll second it. Go.
Thank you, Brother Cody. Brother Cody has moved at this time that nominations cease. Are there any further nominations? Are there any further nominations for the office of Secretary Treasurer? Are there any further nominations? It has been moved and seconded that nominations cease. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Secretary Treasurer. At this time, it gives me a great deal of pleasure to turn the podium over for the nominations of the Executive Board members to my executive and administrative assistant by Constitution, Brother Ed Gorham.
Thank you, Charlie. Before we get to the first district nominations, I want to thank Sister Mother for the nomination. The chair will now entertain nominations for the office of Executive Board member for the 3 seats from District 1. Will the chairman of the District 1 caucus, 4 seats. Chairman, please report.
Yeah, out of District 1, we have come up with 4 names. Woodrow Cody, IBW 1253. Herbie Clark, Katahdin Central Labor Council. James Mingo, UPIU number 24. And Ted Kimball from the Bricklayers, number 7.
Thank you, brother, for your nominations reports. Are there any further nominations from District 1? Hearing none, we'll move on to District 2. Will the chairman of the District 2 caucus please give us the nominations?
As a result of our caucus in District 2, we have the following names for nomination. James Harrington, Industrial Union Marine Shipbuilder Workers, Local 6. Ed Merrill, Plumbers Union 783. Raymond Hinckley, UPIU, Local 57. John Portella, Iwamska, Local 6.
You've heard the report from the chairman of the District 2 caucus. Are there any further nominations from District 2? Hearing none, we'll move on to District 3. Will the chairman of the District 3 caucus please take the microphone?
George Netto, Local 2327 IBEW. After a very lengthy caucus, we've come up finally with 4 names to place in nomination. John P. O'Brien from the Metal Trades Group, 1915. Christine Hastet, AFME 2179. Donald McCurdy from AFME 2089. And George Netto from IBEW Local 2327.
Thank you, brother. Are there any further nominations from District 3? Hearing none, we'll move on to nominations for positions at large. The floor is open for nominations at large. Brother Netto.
I place the name of Philip Place, IBEW 1837, in nomination.
Brother Cody.
I'd like to place the name of Arthur Gordon, UPIU, Local 1069, in nomination.
Thank you, Brother Cody. Are there any further nominations?
Yes, I'd like to place the name of Michael...
Excuse me, brother.
Oh.
What is your name and affiliation, please?
Kevin Sullivan, Local 385, the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. I'd like to place the name of Michael Kavanaugh of the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union, name and nomination.
Are there any further nominations from for the at-large seats? Chair recognizes Brother Cody.
Make a motion nominations cease.
Been moved and seconded that nominations cease. All of those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? It's a vote. It's faster that time. Brother Cody.
I make a motion that the secretary cast 1 ballot for all nominations to unopposed.
The motion is out of order, brother. The Constitution calls for the election to be held on the last day of the convention. If you were, in fact, to hold the... all right. Brother Netto.
I think to word it a little more gently, I'd like to ask the chair to take a look at the Constitution and prepare themselves tomorrow to use the process of acclamation to handle the names placed in nomination.
Thank you, brother. I know how much you all want to sit around and wait to see what the Resolutions Committee comes up with, but we don't know how long they're going to be. In the meantime, we'd like to ask our good friend Edie Beaulieu if she'll give us a few remarks. I might point out that Edie is the House Chairwoman of the Joint Standing Committee on Labor in the 110th Legislature. Her counterpart on the Senate side is Senator Charlotte Sewell from somewhere in this neck of the woods. Early on in the legislative session, we knew there was going to be a battle between these two, and it was billed as the battle between the Washer Lady and Spider Woman. Edie is a member of the Newspaper Guild in Portland. She's a shop steward and one of several members in the Labor Committee that hold the books with the AFL-CIO, and it gives me a great deal of pleasure right now to ask Edie to give us a few remarks.
I thank you very much. This is the time for me to say thank you to all of you who have demonstrated support and took time and effort to come to Augusta to help me try to do my job to protect you as best as I could in this past session. Being chair of the Labor Committee is not the greatest easiest job in the world. I'm known to be a hard-nosed, a hellraiser. I'm called the washerwoman, and I'm very proud of it because at least with my hands in water, they tend to be clean most of the time. They're clean for the working men and women of the state because that's what I am. And I consider myself one of the most honorable people because I do work for a living. I say to you that the next session is going to be a free-for-all. It's going to be an election year. It's going to mean that everyone is going to be out to cut each other's throats. It's going to mean that it'll be a me, myself, and I year. It's going to mean that the word solidarity will have no meaning amongst legislators. And that's damn bad news for you and for me. The severance pay issue and plant closing bill is going to be under enormous attack. So get your act together and be prepared to defend and literally fight for what you believe in. I trust that not in this next session, but in the new session, the 111th, we will be bombarded with the Florida workers' comp law, which is, pardon my English, the suckiest law I have ever read. You are going to be raped if that law, any portion of it, is ever adopted in the state of Maine. It will infiltrate the legislature. It will not be called a Christmas tree bill this time. It will come one little piece at a time. I see you come on major pieces of legislation, 100 strong, 200 strong. But let me tell you, folks, it's those little bills that slip in there that'll kill you, not the big ones. I predict that compliance issues that are being voted on in Washington are going to impact on you and me as workers. Unfortunately, much of the time we will have no alternative but to adopt that kind of rules and regulations that are being changed there. It's unfortunate that it happens that way, but some of those changes we will be seeing in this January session, and I will find myself again in a position of hating it, but having to do it. I've asked the Bureau of Labor officials to meet with me in November to find out just what those are. I advocate that your labor leaders also do the same so that we'll all know what we have to do in the next session. I think that, as I see it, and you've heard words here today about don't hurt the Democrats, you also have a few Republican friends you should remember, and you have some damn lousy, weak Democrats sitting up there, and the time has come for you to put the screws on them. So if you are going to get politically involved in the next election, and that's not too far away, that's next June, you make sure that if you're going to support a Democrat, that the bastard produces for you. I don't like unions being separated and divisive and to see division. But I'm a Democrat, and I am opposed and have said it publicly to the picketing of the Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner. Basically because it's not the legislators who negotiate that contract. And if they want to hit Brennan, and I'll have to admit he may deserve it because he's not going to the bargaining table, he should be picketed everywhere he goes, not at just one function. And that has not been happening. So if they really mean what they say, that they want to put the pressure on Brennan, you do it everywhere, not in just one location, and not aimed at a function where the legislators tend to show up because they're not responsible for the collective bargaining process. They wanted collective bargaining. They've got it. They need to learn to use it. And unfortunately, what I see happening is a little bit of infancy problems on both sides of the table right now. So I'm not supporting Brennan or the unions. I'm saying that they need to go up and they need to learn what their collective bargaining rights are. So I'm opposed to the picketing. I will not cross their picket line, but that's an individual decision and not one that I would do on a collective basis. I want to say to you that you have an obligation to get more than Eddie Gorham and Al Kameri and Charlie O'Leary in the halls of the House. And I really mean it. You've got 35 lobbyists hanging around, all business-oriented, and 3 labor people in the halls of the House. That is dumb. If it means raising your dues to fund 1 more or 2 more people to be in the halls of that House, then for God's sakes do it. And I don't know of one union anywhere in this state who hasn't got a retired man or a man on a particular day with a day off or a man that can give a couple hours in the afternoon because he's a night worker. If you do not take the time to be in the halls of that House to protect the rights and the benefits that generations before you fought to have placed on our statutes, you're going to lose. And you cannot depend on 3 people when there are 35 others there to work against them. So I urge you to consider finding a way to fund or to solicit a volunteer effort to have both men and women in the halls of the House, because I'm telling you, I have until the next session to serve as chair of the Labor Committee. I cannot do a good job without you. I need you, and unfortunately for you, I think you need me.
Thanks very much, Edie. I think we may have been remiss in our duties here in recognizing politicians. We sometimes tend to forget those in our own midst, and I would ask now that State Representative Herbert Clark from Millinocket please stand up and take a bow. And you can take it from Herbie, there wasn't a bad bill that got through Fish and Game the last time around. We're going to take a short recess at this point in time to the sound of the gavel, awaiting the arrival of Resolution Number 10.
Yes. Sorry about my language, but I gotta tell it the way I see it. Oh, of course. No. My friend Ed. Right. I haven't changed, have I? Still using my lousy
The long-awaited resolution is in the process of being distributed at this point in time. But before we get into that, I'd like to ask Rick Moores and Jerry Hutchinson to please step forward to the podium for a minute. Is Jerry Hutchinson in the house, please? Delegate Hutchinson. There was a reward offered this morning for the return of a chapeau. Brother Moores found the hat, and I hope Brother Hutchinson finds the $2. There's an ace of spades in the top. Is Madeline Matchko wearing this hat last night? Will the chairman of the Resolutions Committee please step forward? Delegates, please come to order.
Brothers and sisters, the Resolution Committee met, deliberated long and hard, accepted debate from many of our brothers and sisters, and tried our very best to present to you a resolve that perhaps would clear the air. We had a secretary, and if I don't see him in the room, is John Patello, Local 6 here. That's quite all right. He was going to deliver this, but in his absence, I'll go on. Do you all have it before you? It should be or is in the process of being passed out, the young lady to the rear. I will read it in its entirety, slowly. The Democratic Party has, by and large, supported and been responsible for much of the progressive legislation that protects the rights of workers in the state. And whereas 2 independent organizations chose not to affiliate with the Maine AFL-CIO, and whereas the independent organizations do not speak for organized labor in the state of Maine, and therefore be it resolved that the Maine AFL-CIO go on record of not supporting these organizations in their public demonstrations at the Jefferson-Jackson Day dinner to be held in Lewiston next month. This is the amended resolution that was submitted by Brother Hare. Is Brother Patello in the room? That's quite all right. This is the unanimous recommendation of the Resolutions Committee. We recommend this and urge its adoption.
It has been moved and seconded that the revised resolution be accepted by this convention. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman, John Hanson, Delegate, Greater Bangor Central Labor Council. I sincerely appreciate the hard work, the difficult struggle, the serious consideration that all of you who have been directly involved with trying to resolve this rather difficult question that we have before us. And while I was not able to go to the session, I have met with people from both sides of the issue, and I can appreciate that this is not a very easy thing, nor is it a question that I think any of us enjoy grappling with. I know we want to dispose of this very quickly, and as I look over the language, I can clearly see that there has been movement, there has been a clear effort to try to come to grips with the problem. Frankly, I'm still bothered by it. It's my intent to vote against it. And I guess in talking with people from both sides of the issue, I've been persuaded that perhaps the best way out of this, apart from a resolution, would be to simply formally instruct the president of this organization to communicate in writing to the leadership of both those organizations this convention, this body's deep concern and sincere disagreement with their actions, and also convey that sentiment in writing to the leadership of the Democratic Party, and avoid the kind of formalization of a resolution on the floor that has to do with the specific kinds of language implicating some other labor organizations that at times we have worked closely with, at other times we have had disagreements with. But that's not unlike the kinds of disagreements we have had from time to time with both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. So I would urge my brothers and sisters here to vote against this, and then let's move some sort of motion directing the President to communicate our concerns formally and in writing to the leadership of the Democratic Party, the Teachers Association, and the Maine State Employees Association. Thank you very much.
It has been moved and seconded that the resolution be accepted by the convention. Is there further discussion? Chair recognizes Delegate Hare.
Roger Hare, Local 1821, and I originally was going to suggest that I have my name removed from the resolution number 10, and the reason that I was going to suggest that was because it is not what I had submitted. But I have reconsidered that within the past 30 seconds. I would urge the delegates to support this, as when the original resolution was submitted, I submitted with the sole intent and purpose of attempting to protect what I considered was the 23,590 AFL-CIO delegates seated in this room. And I have to tell you very frankly, I am a very close personal friend of John's, but I disagree wholeheartedly that we should attempt to match the solidarity of our family unit that we have in this room against the ghost that has proven that they have worked against us. Thank you.
Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, Ken Clark, Boilermakers Local 467. I think that many of the people that spoke here on this already were speaking towards an issue and not necessarily two individual organizations. I think that the language ought to be amended in the second whereas, where it now reads these two. I think those two words ought to be dropped. In the